Hello and welcome to this edition of World at War. I'm your host, Mohammed Saleh. Will Russia shoot down American satellites during the spring offensive? This is a question that is giving sleepless nights to the military strategists in the Pentagon. Konstantin Vorontsov, the deputy director of Russia's Foreign Ministry's Department for Non-Proliferation and Arms Control, has gone on record and has said, and I quote him here, quasi-civilian infrastructure may be legitimate target for a retaliatory strike. We are talking about the involvement of components of civilian space infrastructure, including commercial, by the United States and its allies in armed conflicts. Russia is not mincing its words here. In no uncertain terms, American satellites that have been aiding the Ukrainian war machine in carrying out surveillance, tracking and intelligence will be shot down. And if Russia decides to carry through with its threat, then we'll be witnessing something that has never happened in the history of warfare. And this is no empty threat either. On the 15th of November in 2021, just 3 months before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Moscow tested a new type of anti-satellite weapon called Nudol that has been described as unlike anything that has been tested by any other nation. What Russia destroyed in this test was a defunct Soviet-era satellite called Cosmos 1408. This was a pretty big satellite that weighed almost as much as 1,750 kilograms. These satellite images captured by Numerica, a Colorado-based company that tracks space debris, will give you a glimpse of the before and after images of the destruction of the satellite. The Americans, as one would expect, were apoplectic.
This test will significantly increase the risk to astronauts and cosmonauts on the International Space Station, as well as to other human spaceflight activities. Russia's dangerous and irresponsible behavior jeopardizes the long-term sustainability of our outer space and clearly demonstrates that Russia's claims of opposing the weaponization of space are disingenuous and hypocritical.
The Soviets beat the Americans in the space race by sending the very first satellite Sputnik 1 into space in 1957. But guess what the Americans did? They came up with the world's first anti-satellite ballistic missile called Bold Orion in 1958. Soviet Union successfully developed its own anti-satellite weapon in 1968. Only 2 other nations, China and India, have demonstrated their capacity to shoot down satellites. In 2007, China destroyed one of its defunct weather satellites, Fengyun 1C, using its SC-19 anti-satellite missile in a head-on collision. The Chinese satellite knockout detonation resulted in 40,000 chunks of debris with a diameter that was larger than 1 centimeter. In 2012, India's DRDO's then chairman V.K. Saraswat had stated that India has the critical technologies that are needed for an anti-satellite weapon system. But it would be in 2019 that India, in an anti-satellite weapons test called Mission Shakti, would intercept a satellite, Microsat-R, from a low Earth orbit of 300 kilometers. For the Ukrainians, commercial satellites of Starlink have provided a tremendous advantage. With its constellation of presently over 3,000 satellites that zip past the Earth at an altitude of 328 to 614 kilometers in low Earth orbit, Starlink ensured that the Ukrainian military stays connected throughout. Starlink provides data transfer that is said to be 10 times faster than other commercial satellite communication systems. Starlink's antenna contraption is simple, but its impact on the battlefield was almost immediate. For its part, Russia relies on its GLONASS system for communication and surveillance. But these satellites are simply no match for the 3,000 low Earth orbit constellation of Elon Musk. At the moment, both Russia and Ukraine, that is backed by the NATO military alliance, have fought themselves to a stalemate. Very little territory has exchanged hands in the last 4 long, bitter months of winter. Wars are often decided on the basis of who brings superior military technology to the battlefield. And sometimes, when all else is equal, wars are decided on the basis of who pulls the trigger first. You don't need to blow up a satellite to smithereens for it to cease functioning. There are other ways of incapacitating and jamming a satellite, such as satellite lasers. Both Russia and the United States possess these weapons. The Outer Space Treaty of 1967 has expressly banned the stationing of nuclear weapons or the weapons of mass destruction or the installation of military bases in space. But the one glaring loophole in the Outer Space Treaty is that it is silent on conventional weapons in space. In the last 10 years, the United States has developed what is known as a space plane called the X-37B. The United States claims that this orbital test vehicle is meant only for repairing satellites. But Russia has dubbed this to be a super weapon, capable of getting really close to satellites and even tailing them. The Russia-Ukraine war is poised on a delicate precipice. The sabotage of Nord Stream pipelines has shown that these nations are not willing to hold back from targeting even critical infrastructure. But if Russia or the United States were to train their missiles on each other's satellites, then this would be one of the biggest disruptive moments for every single person on planet Earth. It could plunge humanity back to the kind of life that existed before the dawn of the space age. The Taliban have closed off the main border crossing between Afghanistan and Pakistan. There have been reports of heavy exchange of gunfire in which one Pakistani border guard is said to have been injured. According to the Taliban, the border crossing was closed as Pakistan reportedly was denying access to Afghan patients and had not abided by its commitments. Ever since the one-time protege of the Pakistani deep state, the Taliban, stormed to power in Kabul, there have been several border clashes between the Taliban and the Pakistani border guards. But what is causing these tensions? And why will the Durand Line continue to remain a flashpoint between these two neighbors? Our next report gets you the details.
Tensions between Afghanistan and Pakistan have escalated in recent months. On the 19th of February, Taliban security forces closed the Torkham border crossing with Pakistan. Kabul accused Pakistani immigration officials of misbehaving with Afghan visitors and allegedly refusing to allow Afghan patients and their caretakers to enter Pakistan without proper travel documents. A day after border closure, Taliban security forces traded fire with Pakistani border guards, wounding a Pakistani soldier. In an effort to resolve the standoff, Pakistan's Defense Minister Khwaja Mohammed Asif rushed to Kabul on Wednesday and met Abdul Ghani Baradar, the Taliban-appointed Deputy Prime Minister for Economic Affairs. The next day, the Afghan side opened the gate, but it remained closed from the Pakistani side. Closure of the border has already resulted in losses to the tune of millions of rupees for traders on both sides. More than 6,000 trucks loaded with perishable goods have been stranded. The 2,670 kilometers long border between Pakistan and Afghanistan has been a bone of contention for decades. Known as the Durand Line, the border was drawn in the year 1893 by the British diplomat Sir Henry Mortimer Durand to safeguard the interests of the British Empire from Tsarist Russia. No Afghan government, including the present ruling Taliban, have recognized the Durand Line as Afghanistan's international border. Islamabad, on the other hand, accuses Kabul of providing sanctuary to Pakistani militants who orchestrate cross-border terrorist attacks into Pakistan. On the 13th of November last year, in a chilling incident in the Spinbol Dak Chaman border, a Taliban fighter shot a Pakistani border guard from point-blank range. Prior to that, in January last year, the Taliban tore down the fencing constructed by Islamabad to demarcate the border between the two nations. The repeated skirmishes at the border have been attributed to the ill treatment meted out to the Pashtuns who travel between these two countries. Unless Islamabad and Kabul arrive at a mutually agreeable solution to this long-standing dispute, these deadly confrontations will persist.
At least 5 people, including 4 civilians, were killed in an Israeli airstrike on central Damascus on the 19th of February. This is said to be the deadliest Israeli attack on the Syrian capital since the beginning of the civil war in 2011. At this moment, it is not immediately clear as to who was the intended target. Now, in keeping with its policy, Tel Aviv has again declined to comment on the military strike. But remember, Israel frequently attacks targets in Syria, which it claims are linked to Iran and Hezbollah. But questions have been raised about why Israel has carried out these missile strikes just days after the deadly earthquake in the region.
Syrian military alleged that Israeli missiles targeted Damascus and its surrounding areas in the wee hours of Sunday. Around 12:30 a.m. local time, loud explosions rang out over a central area of the Syrian capital. The overnight strikes created large craters on the roads and wrecked a 10-story building in the central Kafr Sousa neighborhood, which is home to senior state officials and security agencies, but also houses civilians in residential buildings.
12:30 a.m. The family was horrified when we heard the sounds of the explosions and the defense system firing their shots. So they got dressed and wanted to leave, thinking it was an earthquake. But unfortunately, it was rockets. While I was telling them to stay put for a minute, one rocket hit our building. And unfortunately, another one hit and destroyed our home, as you can see.
4 civilians and a soldier were reportedly killed in the strike. In addition to this, 15 civilians were wounded and a number of residential buildings damaged. It could not be immediately ascertained if the strikes were aimed at a specific individual. The strikes also damaged a nearby medieval citadel and an applied arts institute.
This attack is on a heritage site that is protected by international agreements that ban attacking heritage and cultural sites. Important components of this site were destroyed. The damage is quite extensive. As you can see, and affected buildings in the vicinity will all be assessed to see what the costs will be to repair and rebuild.
Tel Aviv in recent years has carried out hundreds of airstrikes on targets inside government-controlled parts of Syria. Not just that, it rarely acknowledges or discusses these operations, which violate the Syrian airspace. What it has acknowledged, however, is that it targets bases of Iran-allied militant groups. Prominent among them is Lebanon's Hezbollah, which has sent thousands of fighters to support the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's forces. President Bashar's regime also receives military support from Russia as well as from Iran. Iran and Hezbollah are declared enemies of Israel. Sunday's attack comes over a month after an Israeli strike hit Damascus's international airport on 2nd January. That attack had killed 4 people, including 2 soldiers. Attacks on Syrian airports have been over fears that they are being used to funnel Iranian weaponry into the country. Iran and Israel are bitter foes and have been engaged in a shadow war for years, wherein unclaimed attacks on each other's assets, infrastructure, and nationals have been perpetrated. These strikes, amid a wider shadow war between Iran and Israel, could not have come at a worse time for Syria, especially when it is still reeling under the 6th February earthquake. The devastating 7.8 magnitude earthquake has killed over 44,000 people in Turkey and Syria. At a time when Syria should be focused on providing relief to those affected by the deadly quakes on a war footing, it has been pushed to watch its airspace for the deadly missile strikes by Israel.
Military tensions are on the rise in the Korean peninsula. Pyongyang launched an intercontinental ballistic missile on the 18th of February, which, according to the North Korean state media, demonstrated Pyongyang's capacity to carry out a nuclear counterattack. Barely 48 hours later, Pyongyang fired 2 short-range ballistic missiles. The same day, Kim Jong-un's sister has issued a dire warning where she has said that North Korea could turn the Pacific into a firing range. What is interesting, though, is that this rhetoric is in response to the joint military drills of the United States and South Korea. So who is stoking tensions in the Korean peninsula? Our next pawn gets you the details.
North Korean state television on Sunday broadcast footage of the country's latest intercontinental ballistic missile test launch. The surprise launch took place at Pyongyang's international airport in Sunan, a suburb of Pyongyang and site of previous missile launches. As per the state broadcaster, the launch was designed to verify the weapon's reliability and to gauge the overall combat readiness of the country's nuclear force. The Hwasong 15 ICBM flew over 990 kilometers for 67 minutes and landed in the Sea of Japan. Interestingly though, Saturday's missile was fired on a high angle in a bid to avoid reaching the neighbors' territories.
Based on the calculation of missile trajectory this time, depending on the weight of the warhead, the latest ICBM class ballistic missile seems to have a capability to fly with a range of over 14,000 kilometers, and in that case, it could reach the whole mainland of the United States. This is an outrageous act that escalates provocation against the international community, and the series of actions are a threat to the peace and security of Japan and the region, as well as the international community. It is absolutely unacceptable.
Saturday's missile was the first to be launched since New Year's Day. Though the past year witnessed launches of more than 70 missiles by nuclear-armed North Korea, a record number for a single year. The very next day, United States and South Korea held joint air drills over the Korean peninsula. F-16 fighters and B-1B bombers from the US Air Force and F-35A stealth fighters and F-15K jets from the South Korean Air Force participated in the drills. In another bilateral exercise on the same day, United States and Japanese militaries conducted joint air exercises, further strengthening the deterrence and response capabilities of the Japan-US alliance. Continuing its aggressive march, North Korea fired 2 more short-range ballistic missiles off its east coast on Monday. Kim Yo-jong, the powerful sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, threw her hat in the ring by warning US forces to halt military drills. She further threatened that the reclusive nuclear state could turn the Pacific into a firing range. In response to US holding joint missile defense warship drills with South Korea and Japan on Wednesday, North Korea test-fired 4 strategic cruise missiles the next day. Pyongyang traditionally describes US-South Korea military exercises as rehearsals for a potential invasion, whereas the allies insist that their drills are defensive in nature. In recent years, US and South Korea had downsized or cancelled some of their major drills. First in support of former Trump administration's diplomatic efforts with Pyongyang, and later because of COVID-19. But this recent escalation in test launches by Pyongyang has raised the urgency for both South Korea and Japan to strengthen their defense postures in alliance with the United States.
The Nagorno-Karabakh war in 2020 resulted in over 6,500 fatalities. But when the guns fell silent through Russian intervention, no solution had been reached. And now the Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan has proposed a comprehensive peace deal. Azerbaijan is said to be reading the finer details of the clauses and has not officially reacted to the deal. Why has this protracted conflict dragged on for well over 4 decades now? And can Nikol Pashinyan's deal actually establish peace in this troubled region?
Yerevan has presented to arch-rival Baku a project for a full peace treaty, which could potentially end the Caucasus neighbor says decades-long dispute over the Nagorno-Karabakh region. The announcement was made by the Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan in a cabinet meeting on February 16. Elaborating further, he struck a cautionary note that the proposed plan has to be acceptable to Azerbaijan to bring about a lasting peace. 3 days later, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken welcomed the meeting between Armenian Prime Minister and Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev at the Munich Security Conference.
We believe that Armenia and Azerbaijan have a genuinely historic opportunity to secure an enduring peace after more than 30 years of conflict. The United States is committed to doing anything we can to support these efforts, whether it's directly with our friends, whether it's in a trilateral format such as this, or with other international partners. But I'm very grateful for the presence of both the President and the Prime Minister today, and look forward to a good conversation.
Tensions intensified between the two South Caucasus nations 2 years after the end of a war in 2020 that killed about 6,800 soldiers and displaced around 90,000 civilians. That flare-up in violence had ended with a Russian-brokered truce, with Azerbaijan ceding territories it had controlled for decades. The region has significant cultural importance for both Armenians and Azeris. This renewed dispute is over a 6-kilometer-long road called Lakin Corridor, which is the only land route connecting Armenia directly with the disputed Nagorno-Karabakh region in Azerbaijan. Blocked by self-styled Azerbaijani environmental activists since December 12th, the 2-month-long blockade has led to a full-blown humanitarian crisis in the mountainous region. 120,000 people are faced with shortages of food, medicines, and fuel. Azerbaijan has rejected the charge of blockade, insisting that the activists are staging a legitimate protest against illegal mining. The International Court of Justice ruled in favor of Armenia, ordering Azerbaijan to ensure the road into the Nagorno-Karabakh region remains open.
The Republic of Azerbaijan shall, pending the final decision in the case and in accordance with its obligations under the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, take all measures at its disposal to ensure unimpeded movement of persons, vehicles, and cargo along the Lachen corridor in both directions.
How will Azerbaijan respond to the proposed peace treaty? And will it lead to a lasting peace between the ex-Soviet republics? Only time will tell.
Thanks for watching World at War. And if you want to reach out to me with any comments, suggestions or feedback, you can do so by tweeting to me on the Twitter handle that you see on your screens. I'm your host, Mohammed Saleh, and I'll see you again next week.